Hi, guys. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Clear to Send podcast. It's been a while, and I'm here with Rowell this morning. Hey, Rowell, how are you?
Hello. Good morning, everyone.
And so this morning we wanted to kind of recap WLPC. We both went to WLPC this year in Prague, which was last week or a couple of weeks ago, and we wanted to kind of talk about our experience being over there. We wanted to kind of recap, the main, I guess, topics of the conference for this year, and then talk about maybe the next one that will
Yeah.
happen in February and introduce the next one. So that's kind of like this episode today. We want to kind of recap this year's WLPC in Europe.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I've never been to the US WLPC. I've only been to Prague. So this was the second time
Hmm.
I've gone to Prague. And by far my most favorite conference out of any conference I've been to. It's such a great event.
Why is it your favorite conference? I'm
I
curious
just
now.
think compared to other conferences, other vendor conferences, it's not as big, right? You and I have been to Cisco Live, and that's about
Hmm.
30,000 people. For WLPC in Europe, you're really getting just the Wi-Fi professionals, so it's a much smaller, intimate group, and you have much
Hmm.
engaged conversations. All the topics are just pretty much strictly wireless or related to wireless, and for
Hmm.
me, even going to Europe, it's a different scenery for me. It's I get to go out of the country, get do some sightseeing. So I'm sure it's like for you when
Hmm.
you come to the U.S. for conferences.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. The fact that it's not huge, I think they had like maybe 150 people, maybe a little less than 150 this year. So it's not a huge group. Like you said, all the topics are wireless related. Sorry, so we are kind of interested in everything. It's not like when you go to a huge Cisco, like you said, and we have to kind of pick and choose what we want. Here, everything is happening at the same place, and there's also a lot of practical aspect to it. So we'll talk about the deep dive, but This is uh, one of my favorite thing about the conference is the practical aspect of it. You're not just sitting down, listening to people for the entire day. You actually get to do some stuff,
Yeah.
which makes it breaks down the day, and it makes it a little bit more interesting, I think.
Yeah, and
Um,
for those who have never been to WLPC, I believe this conference
mhm,
too was the first conference for a lot of people since
mhm,
2 years ago, and so there were a lot of first timers. For those who've never been, there's also a boot camp in the beginning
mhm,
before the actual conference starts. So if you want to get some training done, there's different trainings that happen before the conference that get voted on. A lot of the topics are voted by you, the people, whatever topics you
mhm.
want to hear about or see. And I mean, most recently, Keith did put out the voting for the next WLPC. So there's a lot of great topics there. And I feel like this conference was, getting started for a lot of people. I don't think
Mhm.
the presentations were like over the top or highly technical. I think what I felt was most people wanted to get together and get see their friends, have conversations in
Mhm.
person.
Yes, because you also have a lot of networking opportunities because it's small. And you also see the same people most of the time, so you have a lot of time where you can just network with people in between the presentations, or even after. Like if we were to just kind of describe a typical WLPC day, what happens is you wake up in the morning, you go have breakfast. First opportunity to network with people. Then you have a series of presentations in the morning, 1 hour. I think you have 1 hour, one hour presentation for the morning, a couple of 30 minutes, a couple of 10 talks, 10-minute presentations. You have a break in between, and then you have the break for lunch. After lunch, you go back for a couple of more presentations, and then around 3 p.m., maybe a little bit before that, you go to your deep dive, which is the kind of the giant lab that you have for 3 hours, I think it is.
Yeah,
um, and you can repeat that the second day. So the
yeah,
deep dive is happening over 2 days, and then for the last day, it's just like presentations in the morning, a little bit for the beginning of the afternoon, and then they close the event.
Yeah.
So you have after the deep dive, it finishes at like 6 p.m. You also have some vendor sessions that are kind of pre-prepared or prepared on the go that you can attend to, and the vendors would usually provide the food and the drinks, and then present something or do giveaways, games, and you can also attend these events, or you can go in town, have dinner with some friends. So you have plenty of opportunities to network as well. It's full days, they're pretty long days,
Yeah.
but you have a lot of opportunity to talk to people. Yeah.
It looks like a long day, but it doesn't really feel like it because there are plenty of breaks in between. I think if anything, your mind gets, really tired from a lot of talking, a lot of information you collect from all these
Mhm.
presentations, and you and I had our own set of presentations as well. We'll talk about that, but why don't we talk about your favorite presentations, Francois?
Yeah, sure. So I put down my favorite so my favorite presentation I think would be different from everyone's favorite presentations. Doing the podcast, we kind of know what's going on in the industry because we interview people, we kind of do our own research and stuff like this. So some of the presentations were not new to me, and probably not new to you as well, Roel. So we kind of knew some of the things like got presented. So personally, my favorite presentation were the more technical presentations where I actually learned something new about how Wi-Fi worked. So I picked out two out of the technical presentation that I really liked. The first one was the presentation on WPA3 and the elliptical curve algorithm, because I've never really understood how it worked. And then Carsten Ewan, he presented 10 minutes about it, and I felt like I understood it way better after these 10 minutes. So it was a really good presentation to me. He kind of explained the elliptical curve algorithm in a way that we can actually understand it, and it makes us understand SAE and WPA3 SAE a little bit better. So I thought that presentation was really good, and it's only 10 minutes, so you can watch it or rewatch it if you missed something. The second technical presentation that I really enjoyed was the spatial reuse. So that's also something that was kind of hard to understand. Remember when we were reading the draft document, and
Yeah.
the spatial reuse was always something hard to understand.
Yeah.
But Nadim Akhtar from Arista presented 30 minutes about it, and he explained, the different way of doing it. He explained which one are implemented today, and he showed us some result of testing, which was very interesting.
Yeah, that was
Interesting
the
to
best
me.
part of the presentation.
Mhm. So the the presentation, I get the technical presentation, I kind of present something highly technical in a way that you can understand. That's the one I preferred during the event. So these two would be my favorite two. um, and then I also like a couple around automation. Maybe we'll talk about it, but we had a lot more talks around software during this conference.
Yeah.
But I like the one for Peter McKenzie, which was he entitled it "The Big Scary World of Network Integration and Automation."
Yeah.
And Peter is really good at presenting, and he's kind of like a showman, so he always brings different things to his presentations. So for this presentation, he had like a light, a Philips Hue light, and a couple of APs and a magic
Yeah.
button that he used the Wi-Fi to, and some IoT devices to turn the Wi-Fi on and off. And he kind of explained how he did it, and he did a demo of how he did it. So which was interesting. And he presented a couple of use cases on how we could use IoT and Wi-Fi to save some energy and save money that way. So that was I didn't really learn anything during his presentation because I kind of already knew it, but I
Yeah.
liked the
The
how he
concept was
presented
good.
the data.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the way he presented it with a live demo, something he put together ahead of time, but with a light to be able to show you Wi-Fi is working or not, or the
Hmm.
SSID was actually enabled or not, and being able to use a button or even use a voice command. I thought it was really
Hmm.
neat to see how that worked, and of course, now he's saving about what $33,000 a year on turning off APs or turning down radios. But it's
Hmm.
interesting the calculation of that data, right? So he used the use case of energy and the cost savings there for energy. So I thought that was a
Hmm.
really nice way to put it, in a way that makes sense for some IT manager or even the business.
Hmm.
Cool.
And
So those are
one
your
of the goal,
go ahead.
yeah, I was gonna say one of the goal of his presentation was to showcase that it's actually not that hard to do automation using Wi-Fi. And another one along these lines was the one from Jean-Mac. He did a presentation on automating or get it starting with WLAN automation. And in his presentation, it was kind of like the same thing. He took 30 minutes to kind of show us how to automate the deployment of a site and of a WLAN profile on the Ruckus system. But it's the same for many vendor nowadays. They kind of make it kind of easy, and he used Postman. Peter as well used Postman. So those two presentations was nice because they went um, I thought they tied nicely with the presentation I did in Phoenix, where I talked to people about how to get started with Python. Their two presentations were kind of showing us that you can also do automation with tools that already exist without doing tons of Python, and it's quite simple to do so. So that was kind of like my favorite presentations, I would say, from WPC.
All right. Well, I think maybe later we'll show a piece of automation that I ended up using with my presentation with the help of your code. So we'll
Hmm.
kind of dive into that later. I don't have too many favorite presentations. I think for me, I was just there to be around other people to know what's going on. But I think my favorite one was with Andrew, where he did the 10 Wireshark tips.
Hmm.
I like that a lot because work a lot with Wireshark and trying to be efficient with it, trying to get the data that we want, filters, and getting the right views and colors. I think a lot of that is very useful for your day to day, right? So I think having that presentation and have it condensed to 10 minutes is actually a nice one. Another one that I did like was seeing an update from Hamina with UC's presentation. I thought it
Hmm.
was interesting to see where they are now, especially when we had him last on our previous episode. Seeing their development and their progress was really interesting. And then I did like Jim's presentation on designing Wi-Fi in the worst RF in the world because um, it,
Hmm.
he talked more about like his experience and the process. And we try to design Wi-Fi and we try to be very perfect about it, but it's not perfect, right? And so he runs into these challenges. And if you run into a challenge, most likely Jim has had a much worse challenge than you have. So I thought that
Yeah,
was kind of interesting. And then we
yeah.
had
These.
the deep dives. I did like the spatial reuse one as well because the amount of the benefit that we get out of spatial reuse wasn't
Mhm.
big, right? With it
Mhm.
enabled, just because of the overhead and possibly the number of devices that actually support that have the full support. I think uh, having the complexity of spatial reuse and everything that comes with it wasn't such a huge gain for us. But
Mhm.
I mean, it was one test. Maybe it'd be interesting to have other people do a test with other vendors and other types of devices to see what it really looks like.
Yeah, and it was interesting because Nadim was showing, the information elements that is used by the AP to advertise some of the spatial reuse capabilities. And I was with Wi-Fi Explorer, I was looking at the beacons around and trying to see if we had any beacons like Wi-Fi 6 beacons at the conference that would provide such IE, and I couldn't find any. So I told Nadim, and Nadim showed me an example of one of his beacon, and he's like, it's only there if the AP is supports it. So most
Yeah,
likely the APs that we had at the conference didn't
they
support
didn't
spatial
support it.
reuse.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why we didn't have it. But hopefully that's one of these features that are fully supported and fully used when Wi-Fi 7 comes around, and we can learn as we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, we did get like he was showing a gain. I can't remember exactly, but maybe it was like 20% of gain, something like
Uh,
that
I think it was
on
less
the
than that.
throughput. Less than that, okay. So,
Yeah, it
but
was
yeah.
so small that it may not be advantageous to even enable
Hmm.
all features on your Wi-Fi network. But I did get a good picture of you guys as he was showing you showing you
Oh, you did?
the beacon. Yeah. And speaking of the actual, you were doing a search for a beacon. The APs that were providing Wi-Fi throughout the conference, we had the hotel Wi-Fi, which they need a lot of work on doing
Hmm.
their Wi-Fi, but Open Wi-Fi was there to provide Wi-Fi 6, and then later on provided Wi-Fi 6E connectivity. I think we had a
Hmm.
total of 3 6 gigahertz devices that ended up connecting to that Wi-Fi network. Probably all of NetAlly's handheld tools. But it was
Yeah.
interesting to see their dashboard and how they came around developing open Wi-Fi.
Yeah, that was very interesting. So you can find a couple of presentations about open Wi-Fi if you look at the YouTube playlist. But what was very nice is that they installed the network before the conference, and we had like our own personal NOC where they installed like in the lobby of the conference like a whole
Yeah,
bunch of screens, and you could kind of follow, how many clients were connected and all of the stats about the Wi-Fi network. They were using Net Experience, which is like an overlay on top of Open Wi-Fi.
yeah,
It's a company that provide these services, and yeah, it was. I mean, the Wi-Fi was okay. They did had some hiccups during the boot camps that they kind of fixed before the conference.
yeah.
I did notice some problems on the last day, so I don't know what they were doing, but I was getting
Mm.
disconnected on the last day.
There's
Maybe they were starting to in.
they were
Yeah.
changing it to Wi-Fi 6E access points, and then
Mm,
the actual backhaul, the internet link, I think was capped at 200 megs
mhm.
for all of
Okay.
for everyone at the conference. So there wasn't a lot of bandwidth for all of us to use, right? Especially since during our deep dives, our neighbors were probably downloading images for their WLAN pies and whatnot. So,
Yeah.
why don't we talk about the deep dives? Because
Yeah.
that's something that you pick. You have a selection of deep dives that you can join when you go to the conference. I happen to pick the Antenna 101 deep dive with Jim Palmer. I felt like I needed to really learn the nitty gritty details of how antennas work and connectors and anything I need to know about picking the right antenna. You happen to pick that same deep dive, right, Francois?
Yeah, I hesitated between the antenna 101 and the packet capture analysis. And I told myself, if I want to do the packet capture analysis, maybe I want to do the boot camp, like the whole 3 days and not just the 3 hours. So I was
Yeah.
like, okay, let me just do the antenna 101. Um, and oh my, it was really good. I don't regret at all. It was really good, and we actually learned a lot with
Yeah.
Jim, and it was a lot of fun too. People had a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was very hands-on. So there were a lot of different tools, and I think you have some there, Francois, with you. A lot of different tools that we were able to put together with an antenna and a two-way radio, a dummy load on one end, getting to see the VSWR from an antenna. Lots of interesting stuff with antennas here.
Yeah, and this was cool because Jim gave us like a radio. It looks like a
Just a
security
handheld
radio
radio.
type of
Yeah,
thing. Yeah. And then we connect so we use the radio as a transmitter. We connect it to this meter, which is the VSW meter that calculates how much energy is reflected back to from the antenna to the transmitter. And and the first thing that we did is connected like a dummy load onto it, which
yeah.
absorbs all of the energy. So if we do it properly, and if I generate some signal, then we should see that packet. There's no energy loss. So you see, I have a VSW of one, pretty much 101. which means,
Yeah.
and I have 99.99 efficiency. And then we started connect all the antennas. So instead of
Yeah.
having the dummy load, we started to connect like,
Small
sorry
antennas.
for
Like
this sound.
I have this antenna
Yeah.
here, this tiny antenna, which I
Oh,
thought I've never seen an antenna so small, but this one's from Excel Tech. So we ended up using that patch antenna. Um, I mean, I have
and then
my
we had
bag
this,
here.
we had this antenna with that we could extend, and we did some tests to try to find the perfect length that would give us the less reflection. And then we also, try to see what happens when we have the antenna close to like a metal source, a laptop or a window frame or something like this, and we could see a lot more reflection. So we kind of discovered all of this using these tools, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I
um,
like doing it. You even got a good snapshot of me trying to create interference and reflected energy back to my transmitter. But this is the device. It's
yeah.
called a Surecom. It'll be able to you connect the transmitter on one end and then an antenna on the other end. We had adapters just to fit them
Hmm.
in there, but it does give you the calculation of how much of that energy is reflected back. So um, that's the deep dive where I actually learned how what VSWR is, why it
Hmm.
matters, and now I feel like I have to go back and test all my antennas, make sure they're installed properly, right? Because we put a lot of trust
Hmm.
in installers, and this is where if the installer isn't careful or isn't properly connecting the antenna, your external antennas, then you may get some energy reflected back, and you're not getting the full capability of your Wi-Fi
Hmm.
of that AP. And so going into that deep dive, I feel a lot more comfortable knowing about antennas, and now I feel like I can bring this tool with me and actually test, the antenna and make sure I have the
Hmm.
low VSWR, right, closer to 1, or even we were trying to get to 0, right?
Yeah.
It's almost impossible because of these
Hmm.
little devices. They're not perfect either, right? Like this, or even the connectors, the cables, and so we learned things about the length of cable, right? Like maybe you have an access point that's tucked away in the ceiling, but you need to get to an antenna that's possibly 20-30 feet away. Now the longer distance you are from the access point, that cable, you're going to have some loss there. And so I don't think, it's not the first thing that comes to mind going, oh, well, I just need Wi-Fi over here. I'll just get this cable from, this vendor, and it's fairly cheap, inexpensive. But a lot of times that fairly cheap or inexpensive cable means you're going to get a lot of loss, and your VSWR might go through the roof. And so Jim gave us an example of a really low loss cable. I forgot the term for it, but it's like this really thick cable. I have a picture of it. Maybe I'll add some screen pictures to the show notes. But that cable is so thick that you couldn't bend that cable at all to get it to where you want, if you really wanted low loss and a good VSWR. So I think there was a lot learned for me in that deep dive. Now I'm going to be more careful about the distances of my cables and what kind of cable I'm going to purchase, because there are different types of cables, antenna cables,
Hmm.
to have that low loss. So that way you're getting the energy out of that, the transmit power out of that antenna, right? Because it's passive, it's not going to boost that energy, but you can lose some of it from the cable length.
And one of the good thing about the deep dives as well is you get to keep everything.
Yeah, yeah.
So all of the
This was the
equipment that they
equipment.
gave us, yeah, they so now that we have it, we can actually we could, like, put a video and show it to installers, or
Yeah,
showcase, we know when we do meeting with installers, we can showcase a couple of things like, hey, this is what happened if you put the antenna close to metal. And we can
yeah,
kind of educate them on by showing them visually what that means, and usually has a stronger impact than just us saying, hey, make sure you install the AP properly, right?
yeah.
um, so
Lots
we
of
that's
cables.
that's pretty cool. We get to keep everything.
even the adapters I thought were pretty cool. Like being able to make sure these adapters are good, going from N type to RPSMA. Like there's a lot of things to consider when it comes to antennas, connectors, and Jim is a perfect guy to teach that at a deep dive. And I believe he submitted the same deep dive for WLPC Phoenix if you guys are interested. And you do get to keep that radio. Jim is fully licensed. He's got a ham radio license, but he's also got a commercial license. So he follows the law when it comes to these radio frequencies. So he had all the documentation. He's all about safety as well, because you could get a what did he call it, like an RF burn or a radio burn, and it's different from a heat burn. So lots of lessons learned with antennas from Jim. So really appreciate it. It's not the only deep dive. There's other deep dives. There was a WLAN-PI deep dive, and those guys get to keep a WLAN-PI. What were the other deep dives? So you had your packet capture, which you get, and
they
you get
a
missed AP, an AP33. So that's neat.
Then they had the security, like the pen test deep dive, and they get like a Raspberry Pi. And they usually get a small screen, but they couldn't find a small screen. So people had like 22-inch screens.
22-inch monitors. So one thing to note when you go to WLPC is to bring a larger suitcase for the equipment that you're going to have to take home. I was walking out of my room, and I did see somebody give another person the monitor because they were like, I can't bring this on the plane. So I thought that was hilarious. But to look at the WLAN-PI, that was the other presentation that I did like, was the update to the WLAN-PI. So I got lucky and scored the new WLAN-PI. This is the M4, I think. Yeah, M4. I haven't powered it on yet. I need to go through the labs and whatnot. So it's got connectors, fully 3D printed, use cases for like the thread here. I can put that on a tripod or a mount. They've got some screws on the side where if you need special mounting as well, you can unscrew that. But this is Wi-Fi 6E, right, Francois?
Yeah, I think it has one Wi-Fi 6E card in it.
Yeah, so I now have another client that I can use for any 6E labs, and I don't remember how much I paid for it. I think it was the last one, and I was like, I'm gonna grab it because those things went quickly, right? They had all of the WLAN-PIs, every iteration that you could remember there, and I happened to win one of these WLAN-PIs. These are really nice too. So I got lucky. The funny thing is, now I have 3 of these. I should have just given it to somebody who doesn't have one.
Maybe we can do a giveaway for the podcast.
Yeah, we can do a giveaway. I have 2 already that I paid for, so a third one, I guess it doesn't hurt. We should do maybe a dedicated episode on WLAN-PI and a different. Actually, we have done one, but we could do one with the new 6E.
All right, they have really good documentations too.
They do, and so that's what I'm going to spend some time going through the labs or the documentation that they have for this new WLAN-PI. Get familiar with it and be able to see what capability we have. Right, we can tie it into Wi-Fi Explorer Pro. I know that was the kind of the deep dive they were doing, because you and I actually went over next door to see what they were doing and to talk with Jiri and see what's the update. So it's pretty cool what the Wi-Fi community is able to come up with, and that's what's so great about the WLPC conferences. So why don't we talk about the next one, because the one we went to was in Europe. There is another WLPC coming up very, very soon in February. That is February 7th to the 9th in 2023. That'll be in Phoenix. What do you think, Francois? Did you submit a talk?
So yeah, I submitted a talk, and this year it's a little sooner than usual. It's usually at the end of February, but this year they have it for the beginning of February. And yeah, you could submit talks up until last week, and right now you have the survey out, so you can vote for the session that you want. And they have so many of them. I think they have like
Yeah.
60 something sessions.
Yeah,
So
there's
it's
way more than what we had in Europe,
yeah.
or had to pick from the list in Europe. So this will be an interesting one.
And we can only pick 20.
Yeah.
So you have to you can only pick one third of the presentations, which is a challenge every time. But yeah, I presented a talk to kind of present some of the stuff we've been working on, following your presentation actually at WLPC this year, which is like a little tool that we call the survey data collector.
Yeah.
It's a little Python tool that will extract AP data out of survey files and then
Hmm.
build like a database, a community database, so we can kind of establish some trends on which access points we survey, which vendors are around, the which channel width are being used, which channels are being used, which technology of Wi-Fi being used.
Yeah.
So I started to kind of create the tool following WPC, like on my way back home. I did that, and then
You worked on it
hopefully,
pretty
if I
quickly.
yeah, yeah, it was fun for me to do. And hopefully we can build like a UI for it, so we
Yeah.
can everyone can kind of see the results and filter the results per
Yeah.
vendor, year, whatever.
Yeah. So it's a
So that's
tool
kind of like the
that
goal, and then
a tool that the community can use, right? That on
mhm,
your platform that you've built. Yeah. So if you look at my presentation from WLPC, it's called Wi-Fi Trends. I basically took Francois' script that he has on GitHub, and I modified it a bit because what I was trying to do with my presentation was show over the last 2 years what Wi-Fi looked like after validating. Having, I think, 63 validation surveys, and so I wanted to see, what was the most common AP vendor, what most common channels were used, what protocol was most used, and so you would think I could do that in Ekahau Insights, but you can do that for individual projects, and I needed to kind of aggregate that data for multiple projects. So I used a script that Francois had and just gathered the data that I wanted, ran the script. Otherwise, it would have taken me so much time to analyze 63 files. And I think initially I had just 50 some files because
mhm,
I didn't want to analyze that many files that far back. But with your script, it was able to analyze 63 files in about 18 seconds. And then I just graphed that data. And so you're going to take it multiple steps forward and be able to
mhm.
just upload the files and display the results on screen, without having to manually do the graphing and whatnot. So I think that'll be interesting.
Yeah,
Do you want to try to show what you have?
yeah, sure. So I guess let me share my screen. You tell me if you can see my screen.
Right. Yep. You can see it.
So right now, what I have is I guess the backend, the script, so I can run the script. Um, and what it does is I have a folder with a whole bunch of survey files, and it goes through them. And as you can see, it can extract the data. And right now, what it does is it saves it into a JSON file, and then the goal would be to use a website so people can upload their survey file. The script will run against it and add the data to a database, and then we'll have like a website where we could present the results. So like a front end that we could use to present the results, and people will be able to kind of look at the graphs, different graphs, hopefully. Um, so what I have right now is kind of the backend. Now I have to integrate that into like a website. We do have like a website that we're working on for Zenfire at the moment. So hopefully I can integrate that into the website that we have, so everyone can kind of run the scripts against their projects, and then we can build the front end after the fact. So right now you can see it took like I don't know 15 seconds maybe to gather all of this data. That's about
Yeah.
700 APs, and then right now it just puts it into like a JSON file. So if I open this, you'll see it doesn't really look like anything. It looks like this.
just a lot of data. But JSON, you'll be able to easily read it and grab the data that you want.
Yeah, I can format it so it's a little bit
There you
more
go. Yeah.
readable. But yeah, it can anonymize the data. So we create I create like a random ID, and then I get the timestamp from when the data was collected, the vendor, and then details about the radio. Most of the time it's 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. Um, I do need to test 6 gigahertz. So if you guys have a survey file with 6 gigahertz data, just get in touch with me so I can test it against. It should work, but I still want to test it.
Yeah.
Yes, that's pretty much what I have so far. So I kind of built the back end,
Yeah.
and we'll I guess we'll work on building the front end
Yeah.
slowly but surely. And
Yeah.
whenever it's ready, I'll
Progress.
just share with you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll be useful because to be able to see what you're trending with validation surveys, you can kind of understand where people are, where businesses are, and maybe it could lead to reselling them on later
Mhm,
technology, right? Maybe most of their APs are on the N protocol, and they should upgrade
mhm,
to Wi-Fi 6E. Like you have certain data that you could present, and managers love numbers, and so if you can take this data and show them what their environment looks like and where they're trending, it might lead
mhm,
to a different conversation. And so that's kind of like where I was going with my presentation. And then in the future, I was going to dive in deeper, do a little bit more analysis, just kind of trying to think about what that would look like. But it's interesting to see what automation can get you, where you can go with it. Because for me, I'm not as big in the automation space, right? I once in a while I need to come up with a script to quickly analyze something that would take hours or even days. Like this was an example where I think I was working on this presentation maybe less than a week before the actual conference, and so I was like,
mhm,
"Hey, I'm gonna take your script, do this. I might need your help." And then you actually helped me with the for loop to get all the data that I needed. There was a lot of like ugly ways I try to make it work, but hey, that's what we do to try to do something quickly. It's not the prettiest code, but the code actually worked with the results that I needed.
mhm,
And so that's me as somebody who isn't as well versed in coding, but I know enough to kind of get there. But then with the help of the community, like Francois, I was able to say, "Hey, here's where you're hanging up. You need to do this command, this statement, and it'll work." So that was pretty cool,
mhm,
and I think that's what WPC is about, right? And I think somebody was interested in the script as well, and it's just generating ideas. And I think that's what
mhm,
is most important about WPC is you go there, you may not be presenting, but you're taking in information, and then you're leaving with a bunch of ideas. Like, what, I saw this presentation, I might be able to try this. Like spatial reuse, like I want to be able to test that and see if it's good in my environment, or am I getting the same kind of results. So what we'll do
mhm,
is in the show notes, if you go to cleartosend.net/305, we'll include a bunch of links to all the presentations. We have Francois' presentations on Wi-Fi DevOps, um, including my presentations. I did one on Wi-Fi trends and doing consulting, and we'll include some photos as well to show you what the deep dive looked like that we did with Jim. Do you want to add anything else about WLPC, Francois?
No, I think it was a pretty good conclusion. I think the people aspect of it, like you said, is the most important. And Keith always says that the conference is all about the people. I think the more I do, the more I do what I do, and Wi-Fi and running my business, the more I think that it's all about the people, not just for the conference, but for business and anything in life. So I'm 100% with Keith on this. It's all about the people, and you really feel it when you go to the conference. Even if you want to present, there's everyone supports you when you present. There's new judgment.
Yeah,
So it's people are very supportive, even if it's very it might be scary or stressful.
yeah,
It's stressful for everyone.
It is for everyone.
Oh,
And I know
maybe,
you presented plenty of times, Francois. How
yeah.
did you feel even on this WLPC presenting?
It's always stressful for me. And even if because English is not my primary language too, right? So that adds a little bit of stress as well. um, but you feel very at ease very fast when you start, because people are, you can see people are looking at you, they're kind of nodding, they're giving you positive vibes. So you become reassured pretty fast, and then if you prepare yourself enough, then it's usually okay.
Yeah.
And you end up being very happy at the end.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
I'll be happy that it's all done.
yeah,
I
so
can tell that
it's yeah, it's
it's
very
not the
nerve
easiest
wracking, but
thing.
it's worth it. Yeah.
Yeah, it is definitely worth it. Um, you'll grow from it, right? So if you're thinking about
Mhm.
presenting, but you're scared to present in front of a lot of people, like I know how you feel. I think that was the first presentation I've done in front of that many people in a long time, multiple years, over 2 years now. And so I was
Mhm.
very nervous, even down to the point where I'm waiting to go up next. Like my heart's just beating so hard. But yeah,
Mhm.
once you start going, you forget all about that. I would just say prepare, right? Practice your presentation. That's something that I didn't do for this time around. But if you prepare and you practice, you'll get better at it and you'll be more comfortable when you present. And so
Mhm.
watch presentations from you, Francois, from watch Jim's presentations, watch Peter's. Also, David Coleman is excellent at presenting.
Mhm.
Watch those guys, see how they present, try to pick up tips from what you see.
Yeah, something that I've seen the good presenters do, and I try to copy nowadays, is try to introduce your presentation with something that kind of break the ice, but in not in a, not a bad joke or
Yeah.
something to try to find something that's going to make everyone turn their head towards
Yeah.
you and give them a smile, and that's going to
There
ease the presenter, because he's going to be like, okay, everyone's smiling.
yeah.
And then it's going to ease the people who can be like, oh, this sounds interesting. So
There's
and you
one
can, like, Peter.
presenter.
Peter does this all the time, right? He would do like a magic trick or
Yeah, he
do
present
some sort of
some shock
tease. Yeah.
value.
Hmm.
He has a good intro. The one that shocked me the most was Drew Lentz when he presented. He got all
Oh yeah.
mic'd up, plugged in his laptop, and then he just went, "Whoa!" like really loud.
Yeah.
And everyone just kind of like sat up, like, "Whoa, what the heck?"
Yeah.
But
What's
that
going
woke
on?
everyone up, right? And you're just looking at him, and he's like, "This is what I do." And every single presentation, I thought
Hmm.
that was
Hmm.
hilarious, but um, it was really
Yeah, and
loud though.
also, and you mentioned watching presentations and learn from them. There's also, he didn't present this time, but Troy, when he presents, he usually adds like a bit of history every time. So he would like present, like in one of his first slides, he would just talk about some random stuff that no one knows, and somehow he can
Kind of ties
somehow
it.
he kind of, yeah, he ties it to his presentation, and then you've just learned something, and now you're interested about the presentation. So these little tricks are very nice, because it spikes up your presentation, and I think
Yeah.
it makes it more interesting for the people as well.
Yeah. So don't be afraid to submit your presentation, even if it becomes a 10 talk. I think it's great experience. You know, these are your peers. Um, we
Mhm.
remain positive no matter how good or bad the presentation can be. I mean, you can read off of your slides if you want to, but as long as the information is also valuable, I think there's something to learn from it, right? So WLPC in a in a short recap, I thought was well worth it. I would highly recommend anyone who's never been to WPC to go ahead and register for the next one,
Mhm.
and it'll be a very good experience for you.
Mhm. Yeah, so we'll put the show notes, the like you said, the links in the show notes if you guys want to participate to the survey for the next one. I believe Keith put out a message last week saying that he already has like 400 plus answers,
Yeah,
so
but he
people are
needs
interested
more,
in it.
right? He wants more.
Yeah, probably he probably wants like 1,000, something like that. Um,
All right,
which is totally doable. Which
it
is
is.
totally
Yeah,
doable.
cool. Well, we hope you guys enjoy this episode and learn something about WLPC. And hopefully we'll see you at the next WLPC. But if you guys have any questions, head over to the show notes, cleartosend.net/305, and we'll catch you at the next episode. Bye, guys.
See you guys. Have a good week.